We will be picking back up on Chapter 29, Bitten, The Secret History of Lyme Disease and Biological Weapons by Kris Newby. Sins of Our Fathers, Palo Alto, California, 2017. The sins of our fathers are to be laid upon the children. William Shakespeare, The Merchant of Venice. In November 2017, I joined my parents for our regular Saturday breakfast at their independent living community. We sat in an elegant dining room that looked out into a garden courtyard with a stately California live oak at the center. The three-story building had the amenities of a boutique hotel: a gym, a media room, a library, and an indoor pool. My father, a former Navy pilot and builder of military spy satellites, was 83 but still had a full head of white hair and a bushy mustache. About a year in their new apartment, he was missing his home in Oregon, an art-filled farmhouse designed by my architect mother, located atop a hill in the middle of a 300-acre tree farm not on Google Maps. After my father had an emergency surgery for an intestinal blockage, then triple bypass heart surgery, my sister and I had convinced him that it was time to move closer to family. I saw a doctor at the VA hospital this week, he told me that Saturday. The first thing he did was ask me if I had ever been exposed to Agent Orange. Then he nonchalantly said I told him yes. I delivered the first shipment to Vietnam. What? I said, astounded. Yep, he said. Then he told me all about the secret mission transporting 75 forest green steel drums stenciled with Agent Orange belly band on the airstrip of Saigon, also known as Roundup. I was speechless. Agent Orange was one of the most ecologically destructive chemical weapons in the United States arsenal, mix of two herbicides that was sprayed over the jungles of Vietnam to decimate the Viet Cong's food supply and all vegetative cover. Deemed safe for humans by Fort Detrick scientists at the time, it was later found to cause birth defects and cancer. Oh, the people that run the National Cancer Institute? Causing cancer? Huh. Among other chronic ailments, I'd discussed Cold War biological and chemical weapons with my father many times. Why, 4 years into my research, was this the first time I was hearing this? I would have thought he'd have brought this up at least once, given that both Agent Orange and Willie's bioweapons projects had been developed at Fort Detrick. Why was it so hard for our Cold Warriors to part with their secrets? A few years ago, I was reading Tim Weiner's book, The Legacy of Ashes, The History of the CIA, the history of the CIA, when I paused at the section about next generation spy satellite launched in the 1970s by the CIA's Science and Technology Division, codenamed Keyhole. It provided real-time television images instead of slow-to-develop photos. Something about the details seemed familiar, so I called my dad and asked if the Keyhole was the top-secret project he had worked on while we were living in Northern Virginia. Yes, he said, and explained how the technology he had developed went on to be used in the Hubble Space Telescope, and it became the eyes in the sky for the armed drones. And it became the eyes in the skies for the armed drones, I added. During the Agent Orange discussion, my mother weakly smiled and pretended to follow the conversation. She was 80, with thinning white hair. That day, she was wearing the same ugly glitter star blouse she'd worn the last 3 times I saw her. As a high school girl in Salt Lake City, she kept a calendar on her closet door listing all the clothing assembles she'd wear in the coming month, a way to make sure she never repeated an outfit. The star blouse was proof positive to me that the mother I remembered was no longer inside the body sitting across from me. It's difficult to watch someone who was so creative and driven fading away. We have no official diagnosis for her, but she had no longer any short-term memory, and her whole neurological system seemed to be weakening. It's hard to believe that this was the same person at 41 years of age while raising 3 kids, graduated first in her architecture class at a Catholic university. She went on to design historic building restorations in Washington, D.C., build stately mansions in Northern Virginia, and fly airplanes. My mother's mental disease decline started after the second of the 2 tick bites one in 1993 in Northern Virginia and the other in 1998 in Northern Italy. Her first bout of Lyme disease was diagnosed at the Bethesda Navy Hospital when a physician discovered 3 large bullseye rashes on her behind. The physician was so excited at this classic presentation of Lyme that he called in several other handsome young Navy doctors for a viewing. My mother, somewhat of a flirt, loved telling this story. When she was bitten again while on an Italian walking tour of villas designed by the Renaissance architect Palladio, she came home with what looked like a spider bite on her upper arm. In hindsight, I believed it was the Eschar lesion, a black oozing sore from the site of a bite from a tick infected with Rickettsia bacteria. 5 years after a slide into a crazy, ever-changing array of neurological symptoms, my mother tested positive for Lyme disease and spotted fever. She was on and off antibiotics for years and even went to a special Lyme clinic in Switzerland, but the disease and several other health complications were taking over. Now she was too weak for any kind of heroic medical intervention. At the end of breakfast, I helped her up and gently hugged her goodbye. It felt as if she were made of papier-mâché, hollow inside. My father's parting words to me: don't ever get yourself killed over this book. Chapter 30, Surrender, Wisdom, Montana, 2017. Hear me, my chiefs, I am tired, my heart is sick and sad. From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more. Chief Joseph, a.k.a. Thunder, traveling to the loftier mountain heights of the Nez Perce, October 5th, 1877. Paul and I drove away from Hamilton up a narrow canyon road along the Bitterroot Mountain Range. The clouds hugged the peaks, leaving a dusting of snow in their wake. Large swaths of forests were scorched from dozens of fires that had swept across the region all summer. We probably saw no more than 5 cars in an hour. It was a ghostly, uninhabited country and stunningly beautiful. As we passed over the crest of the Continental Divide, we looked down on a vast valley of golden hay fields with a wide river snaking through it. It was as if we were viewing it from an airplane rolling down the mountain. We passed a historic marker that read, Battle of Big Hole. We need gas, Paul said. I looked up our location on my smartphone and saw that there was only one town between Big Hole and our final destination. Hopefully there's gas in Wisdom, I said. It's really small. Wisdom looked like a ghost town where at any moment Clint Eastwood might ride up on a pale horse wearing a wool poncho. Excuse me. And carrying a rifle. It is one of the coldest places in the United States, below freezing, 277 mornings a year on average, with July the only guaranteed frost-free month. While Paul pumped the gas, I walked across the street to the general store, which had a neon espresso sign in the window inside bison, elk, and deer heads. Bison. Okay. Inside, bison, elk, and deer heads decorated the walls above the store's Indian blankets, kitschy Wild West souvenirs, and other wares. A glass door mini-fridge up front was filled with large bottles of livestock antibiotics. For a split second, I thought about buying a bottle just in case my Lyme disease ever came back. Get ivermectin. A skinny, weathered 20-something girl in Wrangler jeans stood behind the counter at the back of the store. 2 grizzled locals in their 60s stood next to her, hand-tied fishing flies in a glass case. It was 10 a.m. and it appeared that they had already broken into the beer cooler. How do you tell which one of these are the good ones? I asked them. I'd say it's pretty much a crapshoot, said the older one. You from around these parts? I laughed at his joke. I was wearing a designer down jacket with a faux fur collar. A white silk blouse, jeans, and a colorful scarf. No, we just came over the pass from Hamilton. Do you know what happened at the Battle of the Big Hole? I asked. The man snorted in disgust. Those army assholes had been chasing Chief Joseph all over Montana and Canada when they caught him over there. He pointed back up toward the Big Hole historic marker. That's where the chief said his famous line, "I will fight no more." He had to surrender to the one-armed army general. Big Hole was the site of the bloodiest conflicts in the U.S. government and the Nez Perce, when a quarter of this tribe, mostly buffalo hunters, refused to be interned on a reservation. U.S. soldiers ambushed them while they were sleeping. The Nez Perce lost 89 people, mostly women and children, and the U.S. soldiers lost 29 with an additional 40 injured. 2 months later, Chief Joseph surrendered, saying, "I am tired of fighting. Our chiefs are killed. Looking Glass is dead. Tahul Chute is dead. The old men are all dead. It is the young men who say yes or no, who led on the young... He who led on the young men is dead. It is cold. We have no blankets. The children are freezing to death. My people, some of them, have run away to the hills and have no blankets, no food. No one knows where they are, perhaps freezing to death. I want to have time to look for my children and see how many of them I can find. Maybe I shall find them among the dead. Hear me, my chiefs. I am tired. My heart is sick and sad. From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever. I stood at the edge of wisdom, looking out over the valley full of ghosts from a senseless war. The Native Americans who used to live here understood that they were part of nature, not overlords of all living things. When the white settlers arrived in the Bitterroot Valley, they clear-cut the trees around Hamilton for their houses, railroad ties, and mine shafts. This fostered the overgrowth of brush, which led to a proliferation of small mammals, the blood meal hosts for the wood ticks that carried Rickettsia rickettsii, the spotted fever epidemic that, at the turn of the last century, was fueled by this disruption of a previously balanced ecosystem. The Cold War era bioweapons race was yet another misguided war, one that had disrupted our ecology in ways we're now only beginning to understand. It's hubris to think that we can weaponize living things and not have them come back and bite us. As I left Montana, I knew that some people would find it difficult to come to terms with the stories I was putting on paper, but I also knew by understanding the truth that we can find a way forward to fix our current problems and possibly avoid repeating these mistakes. And that's the end. Here's the epilogue. Palo Alto, California, 2018. Your beliefs will be the light by which you see, but they will not be what you see, and they will not be a substitute for seeing. Flannery O'Connor, Mystery and Manners, Occasional Prose. I believe the history will judge the tick-borne disease outbreak that began in 1968 as one of the worst public health failures of the last century. In the beginning, we were slow to recognize this triple threat, a situation that is now out of control, spreading far and wide, could have been contained with an early intervention of tick control projects and public education campaigns. The myopic focus on only one of the tick diseases, Lyme disease, has led to treatment delays and My myopic focus on only one of the tick diseases, Lyme disease, had led to treatment delays and fatalities in patients with serious mixed infections. Physicians urgently need rapid screening tests and freedom to use clinical judgment in treating these complex patient cases, without the real and present danger of losing their medical license. What this book brings to light is that the U.S. military has conducted thousands of experiments exploring the use of ticks and tick-borne diseases as biological weapons in some cases. These agents escaped into the environment. The government needs to declassify the details of these open-air bioweapon tests so that we can begin to repair the damage these pathogens are inflicting on humans and animals in the ecosystem. Where did the devil's brew of tick-borne disease come from? If you believe Willy Bergdorfer as I do, there was a deliberate release or accident, an experiment with unintended consequences to the environment. Yet, after years of research, I wasn't able to find verifiable documents confirming the Long Island incident. I'm not sure why Willie refused to disclose the details before his death. With his passing, the only way to know the truth is for a whistleblower to step forward or a classified report to be released. It has been 50 years since the mysterious outbreak of tick-borne diseases began, and fixing it is going to require extraordinary efforts. We have an ecosystem out of balance, with climate change enabling aggressive disease-carrying ticks to move into new territories. Our medical system is still reluctant to test for and treat Lyme disease and tick co-infections. No significantly new diagnostics or treatment protocols have been introduced since Lyme disease was discovered, and our broken government is underfunding tick disease research. If the outbreak was caused by a U.S. accident, we need it exposed. If it was a hostile act by a foreign actor, then it shows how woefully unprepared we are for future attacks. My hope is that this book will widen the lens in our view of this problem and inspire people to more aggressively pursue solutions. We need the CDC to streamline and bring more accuracy to our tick-borne disease surveillance system. We need more DNA detectives to decode the genomes of these pathogens so we can devise ways to disrupt the damage they do. We need epidemiologists to analyze the ongoing spread of these diseases in incorporating the possibility that they were spread in an unnatural way. We need big data medical bioinformaticians to analyze our electronic medical records to define diagnostic system profiles that map disease combinations and geographic locations. And finally, we need the next generation of bright, curious scientists to lead the charge. That means you, Polly. All right, that's it.